Hello, and welcome to the CTO Perspectives, where we discuss unique perspectives about the most current issues in IT operations. And here to speak with us today is, once again, Elik Eizenberg, Chief Technology Officer and co-founder at BigPanda. Hey, Elik.
Hi, Aram. Really good to be here.
It's always such a pleasure and so insightful speaking with you. Today we're going to be talking to you about a topic that is top of mind for many organizations, and that is the DevOps SRE model for IT operations. It's modern, it's innovative, and it's driving a lot of success for many companies like Google. So many companies that consider themselves modern are trying to implement this model, only to find out once they've started doing so that it's not as simple as they initially thought it would be. Isn't that right?
Yeah, you're spot on. Yeah, so there are a few companies out there that already are fully transitioned to an SRE, a DevOps model using some SRE teams. And that is driving a ton of business success for companies. So it's not surprising that we see many organizations out there trying to adapt similar models, but it's a very long journey. I can tell you in my personal background, I was part of the Israeli intelligence service, and I used to be part of an application team. Like I started as being part of an application team, and then at a certain point I transitioned to own an IT department, an IT operations department, and just the difference between these two environments is night and day. So just to kind of get to a point where application developers can really own the operation of their applications and start thinking as IT operations people, that's a very big shift. And I understand why companies are struggling to get there and why it takes a long time.
So let's talk about that difference of night of day in your experience. What is the experience of a, let's say, traditional developer? What's his environment? What is he working with? What does he know?
So, the application developer, in the end, their focus is around creating the code, right? The code, that's what actually runs the application. And their weapon of choice is always the IDE. So they log into the system, they open their IDE, they write their code. They add testing, they do some compiling sometimes, they build a tool, they build the technology. But once it's ready, they take that built code base and they hand it over to the IT operations team to actually deploy and operate. And that's where their job is done. They just own the code, the IDE, and that's kind of the boundaries of their world.
So now when moving to DevOps SRE model, these developers are now asked to both support and operate the application that he or she developed. And what are they experiencing now? What is it that they're seeing that they haven't seen before?
Yeah, so now like you have the built code and you're ready to run it. But turns out there's a lot of other components you need to think about. There's actually a big ecosystem of things that surround your code. So first of all, your code runs within an operating system. And then that operating system is hosted in some kind of hypervisor, kind of as a VM, and that it runs on some kind of physical infrastructure, a server, which is also connected to network devices and some storage devices. So there's really a very big, and all of that runs it within a data center, right? There's a very big ecosystem of different components that can affect the performance and uptime of your application just as much as the code base that you author. The other aspect is around how do you deploy the code? How do you scale that code, right? How do you make it performant? And how do you make sure all of these changes happen without downtime for your users? That is also very complex processes that you have to start thinking about. So again, if you go back to that vision of an application developer that just owns the code within the IDE, and now understand that they have to expand their vision to all of these different moving items, you realize that that's going to be a really long uphill battle to get there.
It's pretty overwhelming, isn't it?
It is. It's a lot of information.
So basically, in the traditional model, developers are in a way cushioned. They're sort of in a bubble, so to speak. And in order for them to be able to move to the DevOps SRE model, they need to expand their scope. They need to sort of burst their bubble, if you will.
Yeah, I embrace that terminology around bursting the bubble. I think it doesn't say anything bad about the developer, but because authoring code is hard enough as is. But realistically, if you want our application developers to start thinking about their code operationally around how you operationalize your code base, you just have to burst the bubble, right? You have to get them aware and thinking about all these moving parts in this ecosystem that surrounds their code base.
So, and I'm assuming to do that, since it's a big move and it's a bit overwhelming, there's a few things you have to do so people will want to do it or be successful at doing it. What do we need to do in order to burst this bubble?
Yeah, so my advice for a lot of our customers is normally rotates around two specific things. One is around thinking a lot about transparency and how do you actually gradually get your developers to start thinking about this full ecosystem. And the key there is actually to expose them to signals from many different tiers of the stack. So you have to start showing them alerts from your network tool. You have to start showing them alerts from vRealize, from VMware. You have to start showing them alerts from their cloud, from their network, from their storage. You have to start showing them user alerts. You have to gradually start showing them the entire ecosystem in which their code runs. The second bit of advice I'll give you is around how developers really need tools, right? Developers, one of the main things that allows them to be efficient and to embrace new process changes is good tools. So you have to start giving them access to logging tools, to monitoring tools, to collaboration tools around on-call rotation and incident response. You really have to give them all the different tools around to support that DevOps transition. Sometimes companies are looking for shortcuts, and to avoid the embracing of tools, they just immediately start to implement new processes without building the right tools, infrastructure before that. And that is why I think companies are doing the right thing by kind of building or establishing SRE teams or platform teams to build those tools.
So let's go into a little bit of the mechanics of how do you create that visibility, what it is that you need to bring into that single pane of glass that you discussed in the beginning.
Yeah, so the first piece is just around connecting to monitoring data, topology data, and change data in one place, right? It's about making sure that across the stack, again, networking, storage, infrastructure, application, logging, user monitoring, all of that data has to be in one system, a single pane of glass. But you also have to think about changes, because changes are a big aspect of understanding how your system works and why it fails. So putting all of the CI/CD change management signals into the same system, and finally topology information about different dependencies within your infrastructure across the stack, from the network up to the user. All of that information has to lie within a single pane of glass.
So a lot of information, right? But I think we discussed this earlier. It's a lot of information, but you have to make sure that you're only seeing what's relevant to you.
Spot on, yeah. When you think about a traditional IT operations team, their view is very much horizontal. They see all the operational data across all of the different teams and business units in their environment, and that results in, without exaggeration, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of different events and signals that they have to track. When you think about a DevOps model when a single developer needs to take ownership of their application, it's very important to make sure they only see what they care about, what affects their application. You cannot expose them to this ocean of new signals. You have to make sure there's a way to show them all the signals across the stack. So again, network, storage, all of that, but you have to make that in a very limited, narrow view of their own application.
Yeah, otherwise it's too overwhelming.
Exactly.
Right. It's overwhelming as enough to move to this model without having to deal with things that are not related to you.
Exactly.
So I'm assuming that this is the strategy that BigPanda implements into its product.
Yeah, exactly. We have essentially two components to support that vision. The first one is what we call the Open Integration Hub, right? This is all around providing very good integrations into all of your alert, change, and topology tools. So within a day of work, sometimes within an hour of work, you can just get all of your data into one pane of glass. BigPanda will immediately expose all of that information to any single person in your company that needs access to all that information. The second aspect is what we call environments, and that is exactly what allows you to expose just a narrow vision of all of that information. We allow you to create an environment and say, this is what should be part of this custom view. Only the following applications and services. And the combination of that, the one is the access to all this information, and secondly, the ability to narrow down that information to what affects the individual developer. This is what allows you to transition towards DevOps with BigPanda.
So what's your experience with BigPanda customers, or what is BigPanda's experience with its customers using the BigPanda platform to help push forward DevOps SRE model? Do we see higher rates of adoption?
Yeah, I'll give you two quick examples. One is a very big travel company, online travel company that we work with, and they have this huge vision around moving towards DevOps, and they actually brought in BigPanda to enable that transition as one of the driving force, and we work closely with the SRE teams to allow that. Maybe a more extreme example, a very interesting example, is something that started almost 3 years ago. A very big SaaS company bought BigPanda initially to support their NOC, part of their IT operations team. So they deployed BigPanda, had about 40 users using BigPanda on a daily basis for visibility across the stack. And then at some point over the last 2 years, they started transitioning toward DevOps. And they realized that BigPanda was actually an opportunity. They started giving access to BigPanda to different application teams gradually, and they started giving them kind of this narrow view, this environment view of their stack. Fast forward to today, 2 years after that, and right now we have more than 1,000 users using BigPanda on a weekly basis across all of that company. So, it really shows you how BigPanda can be a good enabler of that transition towards a DevOps model.
So 30 times more people in different teams, in different applications, different environment. That's pretty amazing. It's always amazes me that if you set out to develop a tool that comes out from a specific real need, and then have that tool provide practical solutions to that need, it actually makes a difference.
Yeah, I agree. I have to say that I'm very proud of that aspect of our product, the fact that companies are trying to transition towards a DevOps model that is going to drive them a lot of business success. They're going to be more agile, they're going to have more accountability in the organization, but it's really a transformational transition that's very hard to implement, and knowing that BigPanda can help you in that journey, that is something that I really enjoy about our product.
Thanks so much. As I said in the beginning, this has been so very insightful. Thanks for talking to me.
Thank you, Yoram. This was fun.
And if you want to see more CTO perspectives or learn about the BigPanda platform, please visit us at bigpanda.io. See you next time.